Does anybody here know what the national debt per capita is? Who said 40,000? That's next year, right? Pretty close, pretty close. I won't try and throw it that far. I'll leave it right here for you. Right? 32. You want? Come on up. It's $32,000. In 1970, it was 6,300. Today, it's 32,000, and by 2032, it's projected to be $104,000. So, a baby born today is born with $32,000 worth of debt. Welcome to America. Let's talk a little bit about the national debt. In the first 204 years of our country, 1781 to 1985, we ran up a national debt of $2 trillion. In the next 8 years, we took it all the way to $3 trillion. In 1993, the national debt was $3 trillion. 2006, another 13 years, $10 trillion. 5 short years later, $14.5 trillion, and they just passed a bill to take it to 17. What are they thinking? The 2010 budget, anybody know what the interest amount was in the 2010 budget? It's the number 2 item in the federal budget. $414 billion were paid in interest in the 2010 budget. The only thing bigger was the Department of Defense with $667 billion. It's more than the Department of Labor, Department of Agriculture, where all the food stamps are paid out of, by the way, and the Department of Veteran Affairs combined. Now think about this. This really gets me. This gets me going. $400 billion where we didn't get any services. There was no military, there was no border patrol, there was no women, infants and children's checks sent out, no Social Security, there was nothing. We paid the Chinese and everyone else who holds our notes $400 billion last year. 400 billion of our hard-earned dollars. Now, just to frame a little bit the way the budget works, does anyone remember when we were having this most recent negotiation about raising the debt ceiling? The Boehner proposal, it was called, was there to propose that we would cut over the next 10 years $1.2 trillion. Correct? Anybody remember that? So you would think that what we're spending now, 10 years from now, we'd be spending $1.2 trillion less, right? Oh no. Yeah, I see lots of heads going back and forth. Oh no, 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 no. No, the way our budgeting system works, in 2021, we're supposed to be spending $24.9 trillion. So, across those 10 years, what would happen is, rather than spending $24.9 trillion in those 10 years aggregate, we would be spending $23.7 trillion. That's really fixing things up, isn't it? A great line out of an Idaho newspaper last week. This is like watching this argument is like watching 2 drunks argue about their bar bill on the Titanic. Okay, all of this goes to a very important place, and that is the social compact that society enters into when it constitutes a government. Someone said the other day that a pollster said that he believes that America is pre-revolutionary today. And I think I know the reason. I agree with him, and I think I know the reason. It's because we, as a people, make a contract with ourselves when we constitute a government. How do we constitute a government? We constituted it with the Constitution, right? And what the bargain was that we want the federal government to perform very specific things for us, protect us collectively, right? They can issue the money. They can do some very specific things that we called out in the Constitution, and our part of the bargain is that we will be productive and send our dollars to Washington to fund those activities. The second thing we will do is we will elect and send some people to administer that, our elected representatives. And the problem we have today is the contract's broken. We got some people there who aren't doing their things they're supposed to do that are called out in our contract that we call the Constitution. And that's why there's so many of us sitting in places like this having these discussions about what we can do about the danger that we are in today. You see how terribly wrong all this is going. You know, civilizations have fallen through time because the despots in charge have looted the treasury. And ladies and gentlemen, thanks to the miracle of modern paper and notes and electronic funds transfers, our leaders haven't merely looted the treasury. Oh, no, no. They've looted our children's treasury and our grandchildren's treasury and their children's treasury. Intergenerational theft of an appalling scale is underway. And the people that we sent to Washington to supervise the government we established have created this intergenerational theft at an appalling scale. I mean, these Warrens have rung up the largest tab in world history. This is the most debt ever owed by anybody, ever. And you know what they suggest we do about it, of course? Spend more. That's right. We should spend some more to fix this problem. Well, I don't know. How did we get here? I have to confess, I was a little naive when I started paying attention. I mean, I knew that there was liberal bias in the media, and, you know, I think, like a lot of folks of my generation, that I'd been under the impression that our system of government was robust enough that it couldn't get too far off the rails, you know. There's checks and balances, and you know, as part of what I like to call the productive class, the 52% of us who pay taxes, you know, those of us out here who did what we told we were supposed to do. We know we raised our family, went to school, got married, had kids, raised our families, sent them to school, built companies, hired people, paid our taxes. The productive class. Yeah, I think we thought that we couldn't get in too much trouble. And what we saw happening over the years, step by step, as I covered earlier, was the national debt grew and grew and grew and grew. And the annual interest bill that we paid grew and grew and grew and grew, and we got nothing for it. So our elected representatives have so badly failed the American people with these mind-numbing statistics, and generations of posterity are being spent into bankruptcy. And I'm going to give you some spending examples now. And no personal offense to any Democrats in the crowd, okay? But you know, I feel very bad for Democrats today. I really do. I know I have personal friends that are Democrats, and I just feel really badly for them, because when Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid are the face of your party, man, you got problems. The Democrat Party has been taken over by the fringe left. San Fran Nan, the most liberal political arena in America, she's kind of the face of the House of Representatives. It is unfortunate for mainstream Democrats that that's what they are faced with. But I would like to point out that Democrats have controlled both houses of Congress for 55 of the last 77 years. In 2008, we had a $480 billion deficit. This year we have a $1.5 trillion deficit, and in my opinion, that's because we had Democrats running the House, the Senate, and the presidency for those 2 years. Now I'm going to read to you some outrages, if I can keep my papers from blowing off the podium here. I started off saying, how did we get here? Well, this is just the National Institute of Health. You'll love these. The National Institute of Health spent last year $154,500 asking individuals to mail in their toenails in an effort to research how much toenail nicotine is present versus saliva swabbing. They spent $163,500 seeking to explain, I can't read that one, drug-using behaviors among men who attend parties together. 1.2 million spent since 2003 trying to find out if a mother rat, when given cocaine, will abandon her babies. Washington, D.C. generally spent $25 billion last year maintaining empty buildings. $25 billion of your dollars maintaining empty buildings. Washington will spend $2.6 million training Chinese prostitutes to drink more responsibly on the job. The Federal Communication Commission spent $350,000 to sponsor NASCAR drive at David Gilliland. Did you know you sponsored a NASCAR driver? How about that? The Defense Department wasted $100 million on unused flight tickets that were refundable. They just didn't go get the refund. Congress recently spent $2.4 billion on 10 new jets that the Pentagon insisted it did not want and would not use, but they bought them anyway. The Conservation Reserve Program pays farmers $2 billion a year not to farm their land, and the Commerce Department last year lost 1,137 computers, many of which contained your personal information. That's our government at work. So you want to know how we got there? They spend money just to spend it. There's not a lot going on that's helping out the citizens of America in this. I want to read to you, if I can, one of my favorite quotes from 1794. James Madison said, "I cannot undertake to lay my finger on that article of the Constitution which granted a right to Congress of expending on objects of benevolence the money of their constituents. Today we have a proposed budget that will spend $2.6 trillion on objects of benevolence." That's how far wrong we have gone. So one day we look at $14 trillion in debt, we spend $400 billion a year in interest, and we just look around and say, who voted for that? So who are these people? Who did vote for that? Well, Democrats have foisted upon us the biggest Keynesian spending binge in history. The result has been no GDP growth, 9% unemployment, 0 jobs in August, decreased consumer spending, inflation, debt as far as our great-grandchildren can see, and a national credit rating downgrade. I used to think they were incompetent, and I don't anymore. I think they do it on purpose. I think they're actively undermining this country, and I think they're attempting to change it from what it was to what they want it to be. Let me read you from something from Saul Alinsky's 1971 book, Rules for Radicals. And if you haven't read this book, you need to, because it'll help you understand these people. In the first chapter's opening paragraph, Alinsky writes, "What follows is for those who want to change the world from what it is to what they believe it should be. The Prince was written by Machiavelli for the haves on how to hold power. Rules for Radicals is written for the have-nots on how to take it away." Outlining his strategy in organizing, Alinsky said, "There's another reason for working inside the system. Dostoevsky said that taking a new step is what people fear most. Any revolutionary change must be preceded by a passive, affirmative, non-challenging attitude toward change among the mass of our people. They must feel so frustrated, so defeated, so lost, so futureless in the prevailing system that they are willing to let go of the past and change the future. This acceptance is the reformation essential to any revolution. To bring on this reformation requires that the organizer work inside the system among not only the middle class, but the 40% of American families, more than 70 million people, whose income range from $5,000 to $10,000 a year. Remember, this is 1971. They cannot be dismissed by labeling them blue collar or hard hat. They will not continue to be relatively passive and slightly challenging. If we fail to communicate with them, if we don't encourage them to form alliances with us, they will move to the right." Gosh, that's a little eerie sounding, isn't it? What's really eerie to me is the statistic I quoted earlier. 48% of Americans don't pay any taxes anymore. Only 52% of us are funding the whole thing. Years and years of the George Washington University Annual Battleground Survey, and this is a bipartisan poll, show that American people unequivocally live their lives conservatively, even if they self-identify as a moderate. If you run through the way they live their lives, they're conservatives. So, we have standing here to fix this, and we can and we will fix it, but there are people that don't believe in American exceptionalism. And today they control our culture. They control popular culture, they control the academy, K through 12 and universities, government, and the mainstream media. And I'm a little embarrassed for myself and my generation that we let this happen, kind of on our watch while we were busy being productive. You know, we wake up one day and the country that we were born into has been lost for our children. And my goal in life is to recapture it for our grandchildren, because I think we can do that. But we are going to have a fight. And I got a big question. And, you know, I'm feeling like calling some folks out right now. Here's my question. Is it not an act of treason to intentionally undermine the Constitution? Yes. What about committing acts that economically undermine this country, weakening it in the eyes of its enemies, and doing this at a time when we are at war? Yes. Does that not provide aid and comfort to our enemies? Treason is the only criminal act defined in the Constitution, and I don't think it's erroneous to say that economic treason is being committed today by our elected representatives. The President swore an oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution, and our sitting members of Congress swore to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. These people will not go quietly into that good night. We know we have a very hard fight on our hands, and now because we disagree with them, and apparently they've never heard of the First Amendment, they are coming after us big time. Sitting members of Congress are saying that we, Tea Party, by the way, in my opinion, the Tea Party is a state of mind. That we Tea Partiers who sympathize with the original Tea Partiers who threw that tea in the harbor, we have sitting members of Congress saying that we want black people to swing from trees. You hear that? Did you hear what Maxine Waters said? Maxine Waters said, the Tea Party can go straight to hell, and I'll help them get there. Now that last thing is fascinating to me. How do you help someone get straight to hell? I think that's a death threat. I'm mortified that the people who represent us are speaking out in this way. And then the other night, I don't know if you saw this on television, we had this union goon, Jimmy Hoffa Jr., stand on stage and yell that he runs the president's army. And they're going to take us sons of you-know-what out. And the president followed him on stage and didn't denounce him. Didn't say a word. So, rules for radicals number 13 is pick the target, freeze it, personalize it, and polarize it. And I'm starting to figure out why suddenly the Tea Party is the target of every leftist in America. So on this day, as we commemorate those lives lost to America's external enemies, it's up to us to reclaim America from its internal enemies. I ask you to find a candidate, fund a candidate, or be a candidate. And I want you to make sure that your precinct chairman is a conservative. And if he's not, run and become the precinct chairman. Remember that precinct chairs elect county chairs, who elect state chairs, who elect national chairs. The way to make a party more conservative is to start at the precinct level. So we can restore America and we can return to growth. We can pay off this debt, believe it or not. All it takes is a little growth. You can do the math and you can see what it would take over the course of 15 years to pay off the debt. As far as I'm concerned, let me know if you agree, the correct amount of national debt for America is 0. Why do we pay interest out of tax revenues? So we're here for the fight and we will win. The fascist tyrants of the left will lose because Americans are fundamentally honest, conservative folks who don't like being lied to, and because socialism has failed every time it's been tried. And so we'll fight this fight for our children and our grandchildren and their futures. And here's the line in the sand we must draw. No more debt. What cannot happen again, and what our next president must promise to do, is veto any legislation that crosses his desk to proposing to raise the debt ceiling. And we have to shout it to them. If you raise the debt limit again, there will be millions of us in the street in Washington with torches and pitchforks, and we will sweep that place out, and we'll put new folks in, because you're not putting us more in debt. So, I want you to say it with me, please. No more debt! No more debt! No more debt! thank you very much.